Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Solar Opposites. Okay, so this episode it has a plot about the wall, but also it is kind of a thing about how Yumyulack Yumyulack tries to navigate like the teenage high school market thing, and and there's a reason for that. I will get to that, but he starts trying to bet on things that happen in high school, and it eventually winds up going completely over his head. And also there's a side thing where Terry and Corvo buy a rare bullet and for a Facebook group, and I'll explain that. But in any case, I guess you should cover that one first, since it's on the top of my head. But essentially, the B plot of this episode. I'm gonna explain is that Terry and Corvo are currently sitting in the house, and Terry's using one of those foot smoothers to actually clean off his feet, and remark that he could finally taste the floor again, which is this thing that Slurpeens are established to do. They don't like wearing shoes for that specific reason, but. And of course, Corvo comments on the fact that Terry shouldn't have done that in the middle of the living room because now all of his dead skin cells and other things are everywhere. But then it's at this point where they get a knock at the door, and they're hoping that it is what they think it is. And sure enough, they find out that it's actually a novelty Crystal Skull shot glass bullet signed by Mark Hamill, which is just a really oddly specific thing. And of course, they're very happy. And of course, Terry and Corvo are very happy about that because obviously, not obviously, but it turns out they're in some sort of Facebook group where they talk about rare and expensive bullets. And Terry's just happy to be able to tell one of the people in his group, to essentially suck it, because she's been bragging about how she has the rarest collection of bullets, and now Terry and Corvo have the rarest one, so now they can finally rub it in her face. And they decide that the best way to do that is to actually pose with the bullet in the gun in the chamber, and decide to do a pose. And as they're doing a thing, they actually do wind up sitting down, and do wind up filming the whole thing to actually do a pose. But while they're doing that, Terry, who is holding the gun, accidentally misfires it straight into the air, and the rare bullet just kind of winds up going straight in the air. But Terry conveniently is able to actually successfully watch it because, as he explained, I don't know. I'm not going to explain that, but watch the episode. But I'm not going to say that in a video. But I'm not going to say the reason why, because it's dirty. But essentially, Terry is able to actually see where the bullet is going. And tasks Corvo with the job of making sure nothing distracts Terry, so that he's able to actually keep an eye on where the bullet is going to land. And of course, Corvo immediately does that. The first thing he does is immediately push a kid in a wheelchair, which is a bit yikesy, and there's also a Hulu approved stamp on it, which is really funny, and that is actually a recurring bit. And of course, Terry and Corvo continue to watch the bullet, but Terry then eventually the wind shifts, and Terry winds up having to walk across the street to continue to follow the bullet. And it winds up on the property of their neighbor Glenn, who doesn't like them very much, as we find out. Glenn is. Essentially, Terry accidentally bumps into Glenn's car, slightly grazing it with his elbow while trying to adjust himself. And Glenn comes out. He is not happy about it because somebody tucked his car. But and even after Corvo explains exactly what happens, Glenn just kind of tells him that he doesn't know what any of that means. But all he knows is that nobody's supposed to touch his car. And Corvo does kind of mock his intelligence a little bit, pointing out that if that's all he knows, that he shouldn't have been able to go through life as he was. But of course, Glenn becomes increasingly annoyed about the fact that they're on his property, and also at one point, Corvo actually uses acupuncture needles to help Terry with his posture, so that he can continue to relax his muscles and continue to not strain himself. So because he's currently just staring straight up at the sky, looking for a bullet that he shot. But and of course, Glenn comes out and tells them that they need to get off his property because he is tired of them actually of them actually just standing on his property without permission. So he decides to actually give them the old Glenn 1-2, which essentially is just him trying to smack them and trying to get them off his property. But they merely mock him, pointing out that that no matter what he does, he's not gonna knock the needle loose or cause Terry to lose his focus. So Glenn comes out with his own gun and then proceeds to fire 6 shots into the air. Which of course Terry and Corvo just laugh at him for, because they point out that his bullets are nowhere near as fancy and that they can still tell which one is which. And finally, sick of them being on his property, Glenn finally decides to back his car into Terry, which does finally cause Terry to lose his concentration, and he does in fact lose where the bullet is. And of course Terry and Corvo immediately ask Glenn why he would do that, but he merely responds that he does not want him on their property anymore, and he just points out that obviously that he just thinks that he's better than them, and he doesn't, and he's tired of them quote unquote messing with him. So he decided to finally get revenge and tells them that now they can kiss his ass. At which point the bullet winds up hitting his foot, and Terry finally retrieves the bullet, but it also causes Glenn to start bleeding because obviously he got shot in the foot. It hurts like hell. But and of course Terry and Corvo quickly realize that this is going to be a problem because technically they were the ones that shot the bullet. And even though it was Glenn's fault for standing in the way of it and distracting them so that he didn't know where the bullet was going to land, it was entirely his fault. But of course Corvo starts Googling the statute of limitations about what it means, about how long you can go before somebody gets shot in the foot. And eventually they conclude that it hasn't been, that they need to wait, in fact, 7 years for the statute of limitations to wear out. And of course they point out that of course Glenn pleads with them to call an ambulance and pick him up. But they merely responds that instead what they're going to do is stick him in a cryopod and just shoot him into the air for 7 years. And then eventually he will return from orbit after the statute of limitations wear out. So and Glenn is very much pleased with them to pointing out that he doesn't want to go into space and doesn't want to go into orbit. But they don't really listen to him because obviously he's been nothing but a nuisance to them. So they stick him in the cryopod and tell him that it'll be fine and that they'll see him in a couple of years. And they do should tell him that next time he shouldn't just try to ruin people's fun and just let them just do their thing and retrieve the crystal skull bullet that they shot into the air next time. At which point they shoot him into space, and of course Terry does wonder if Glenn will actually be fine in space for 7 years, but of course Corvo pointing out that his calculations are never wrong, and the only real thing that could possibly cause his calculations to be wrong if somebody put a rogue unlicensed satellite into the air. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens, because as it turns out, Yumyulack did in fact put his own satellite into the air, which causes Glenn to just kind of ricochet off of it. He flies into a nebula and more importantly into a black hole and is spit out somewhere else in the galaxy, where he is then picked up by Silver Cops for riding around in an unlicensed cryopod, and he's then immediately arrested. So yeah, that's just the A plot, but and also what we find out is that and I'll get to that in a minute, but essentially they do brag about the fact that they now have their new bullet and are very happy about the fact that they were able to get it back. And it doesn't really add anything to the episode, but it is a fun one. But in case going on to the wall part of the episode, we then find out that apparently the leaders of the Bow religion have actually been building a set of armor out of nickels. And what we find out is that their entire plan is to actually kind of reveal that Sherry's alive by putting her in a big, strong armor that looks like a capable leader. And since Tim's dead, they need to actually replace somebody as a leader. So and they point out that obviously it would make her look big, strong, and capable. And when she reveals that she's actually alive, people will actually follow her because she looks strong and capable. But Hulk points out that obviously that is the exact opposite of what they want, pointing out that obviously they shouldn't be hiding about the fact that she's going to lie and just pretend to be somebody she's not. And he does point out that that's a big problem about what they're regarding things, because obviously Tim did that. He's been lying to them for a long time. They can't just hide the fact that their new quote unquote leader has suddenly resurfaced from seemingly death. And of course he points out that the idea that they're building a giant armor thing feels dishonest. So of course Sherry points out that regardless, that she does point out that she doesn't want any lies, and even then she points out that she doesn't want to drag Sherry into it either way. She doesn't want to drag Paisley into it either way. She doesn't want her kid being dragged into something that is none of her business. Very much, and that is very much the point that she's trying to make with them. She doesn't want want her business made public, and does point out that regardless of what they plan, Paisley was promised to be kept safe, and she can't do that if she admits she can't do that if she's forced to be into a leadership position. But and Hulk points out that regardless of what story she decides to go with, that they'll be happy to support her decision either way. At which point, Mother Teresa and Hulk and their second person, I don't know, but Mother Teresa and Hulk go to pick up Mother Teresa's order, which as it turns out is just a Swedish fish, which as we find out got a second one wrapped just for being such a good person, and Mother Teresa does bless them, and at which point Hulk wonders if Sherry will actually do the thing what's right for the wall, and of course Mother Teresa points out that regardless of what happens, she's hoping that Sherry will in fact come to the right decision. At which point we find out that no, Sherry has in fact not come to the right decision at all. As it turns out, she has strung up Tim's body on the statue of her that was set up for Sherry Day, and obviously it's this big thing in the middle of the wall, so everybody notices that Tim's decaying corpse is just strung up on a statue. At which point Sherry reveals herself and then tells everybody that Tim is dead, and then proceeds to explain what happened to her and what happened to him, and she does go on to explain how she was in fact kicked out. How she goes on to explain how there is a hole in the wall. She explains how it leads into the backyard. And she knows this because Tim tried to kill her and kicked her out of the hole. And explains how she had spent the past year trying to work her way toward her revenge, but found out he was sick and dying by the time he got there, and tells them that the time for lies is over, and tells everybody in the wall that she doesn't want anybody being dishonest, and she doesn't want dishonesty or anything else, and decides to actually show everybody the truth, and does in fact lead everybody to the wall, and specifically the hole in it. And she does lead everybody to the hole in the wall, and proceeds to explain how it goes in the backyard, but she also tells them that they need to be careful because it is dangerous. Sure enough, one guy just panics because he's finally have enough of being in the wall, and immediately runs out of the hole and gets grabbed by an owl, and presumably gets eaten. So Sherry uses him as an example of why they shouldn't go outside the wall, because unless they absolutely want to. Pointing out that obviously they shouldn't take the fact that there's an opening outside the wall lightly, and that they obviously need to be prepared that it would be dangerous. But she also makes a moving speech about how even then she doesn't want, even if whoever stays, she wants to build a wall for everybody. She explains how obviously putting somebody on a pedestal to be the leader is just going to cause problems like it did with the Duke and Tim. And she explains how she doesn't want that anymore. She wants everybody to be equally represented. So she responds that the best way to do that is for those remaining to build a council electing everybody from different levels of the wall, and that everybody, regardless, will be able to build a council that way and build their own wall and build the wall that they want to build. So, which of course everybody is moved by, and everybody does take to heart, and of course, which Hulk wonders if that's once the entire situation disperses and everybody starts deciding what they want to do. Hulk asks her if that's exactly what she wanted, and she does respond that obviously her main goal is keeping Paisley safe, and that regardless she doesn't want any. She knows that if she was put in the role of leader, that Paisley will eventually come out, and she doesn't want to have to continue keeping that secret. She wants to be able to just keep everybody, to just make sure that everybody's able to govern the wall as they want it to be governed. So, for that reason, she explains how if she were leader, she would obviously eventually have to come up with Paisley, and she doesn't want any more secrets. So she just wants to try to kind of keep anonymous and just keep her head down and just focus on raising Paisley in the wall so that nobody actually has to worry about her. And whole point, and of course, what we find is that everybody is in fact. Bill is in fact doing exactly what Sherry advised them to do. They have all gone on to build. They have all gone on to build better lives for themselves. Some people have actually shut down their businesses. They have actually gone outside the wall, albeit very carefully, and are making preparations to go outside the wall and avoid the various animals and other things that are out there. And they have made preparations to leave the wall. But in any case, as people are leaving the wall, those that choose to remain have in fact decided that the best that they will in fact continue to elect people to run the government for the wall. And they do, and ironically, despite Sherry claiming that she didn't want to be leader or anything else, she got written in as a write-in vote for the 12th level and wound up on the council anyway. So ironically enough, despite making a big moving speech about how she didn't want to be a leader or anything else, she is wound up being a leader anyway, which is ironic. But in any case, she's put on the council, and the leader of the council, who is unnamed, she goes on to explain how now that they've finally formed a council, he hopes that they can continue to keep prosperity for the wall, and remarks that though they have lost a couple of people along the way, he hopes that those that remain will continue to be able to build a better society for the wall for everybody inside of it. At which point, we finally find out what sort of creature is actually loose inside the wall. As it turns out, it's a giant centipede, which then bites one of the wires that is providing power to the wall, and the entire power grid inside the wall shuts down. So, yeah, essentially it is just a centipede that was just living in the wall, apparently. So they finally did address what's going on with that, and now they're going to have to go deal with that. And now for the main plot of the episode, which is that Yumyulack has started navigating the betting market to actually just start betting on high school stuff. And as it turns out, the thing that caused him to actually look into this was in fact the fact that he was dating a girl named Annie, who as it turns out was named cutest. Annie and Yumyulack were named cutest couple. And the bet was that apparently Annie was apparently trying to do a bet where she regardless of who she was with, she would name cutest couple with basically anybody, even someone as unpleasant looking as Yumyulack. And this of course causes Yumyulack to become upset, and she then proceeds to go on to explain how regardless she didn't mean to actually go on. She then proceeds to explain how she actually did wind up falling in love with Yumyulack for real, and of course everybody winds up paying up to the Hamburger Brothers for taking a bet, and of course Yumyulack is upset, but then it's revealed that the reason he is upset is not because Annie lied to him, but rather because of the fact that he now realizes he should have been betting on high school stuff, which of course he realizes now is something that he should have thought of a long time ago, even though Annie points out that that's probably not the message he's supposed to be taking away from it, but of course that does wind up being a thing anyway. So he does wind up going off and Jesse eventually bumps into him in the hallway and asking him what's up, and that she heard about Annie and wonders if he's okay. And he does proceed to go on to explain how he found out he can start betting on high school stuff. And for that reason, he goes on to explain that now he's going to try and navigate the high school things and try and figure out how to actually make bets. And of course, Jessie points out that's actually kind of cool with that. But she also points out that she was hoping he would come to her Model UN thing. And also she points out that she bought a Lakitu Cloud using platinum points from Nintendo with a government recall, which is really funny. But of course, Yumyulack points out that he's already got an idea, and of what he wants to do, and immediately seeks out the Hamburger Brothers and points out that he wants in on some of their bets. And they kind of look at him with a little sarcastically, and do point out that obviously they don't think he can actually pony up with the big boys, but. Of course, Yumyulack decides to try and prove himself by immediately going on to actually, and this is very much a Breakfast Club situation, but he bets that 5 students with no real connected backgrounds whatsoever will not be friends. But in case of point, it's very much Breakfast Club. But the entire joke is that Yumyulack has apparently never watched the Breakfast Club. So yeah, of course, all 5 of them wind up becoming friends, and he now has to try and figure out why exactly it is that went wrong, pointing out that they have nothing in common whatsoever. But of course, the Hamburger Brothers merely point out that he clearly doesn't know anything about high school, and points and asks him to pay up. But Yumyulack then reveals that he had actually used the gold ray to make the value of gold effectively worthless, and he has nothing to give them. And of course they point out that they've heard that before, and then proceed to give him the hamburger squish, which essentially is just them crushing him between those bodies. And to get out of it, Yumyulack decides to go triple or nothing, which of course causes them to do a bit of a double take and wonder if they heard him correctly. And of course he insists that he will in fact do a triple or nothing bet, but explains that it'll be on a bet he decides on. And of course they do decide to let him go, but point out that when he loses, they'll have to take the bet take the bet. And of course he's going to have to pay up big time. So he immediately runs home and points out and tells Jessie, who is also currently doing her own thing, that he needs to figure out how to actually pay off the Hamburger Brothers, because obviously he points out that he's very worried that he doesn't really know anything about the social cues of the social cues of teenage pubescence. He doesn't know any of that. And but as it turns out, after talking with Jessie a little bit, he quickly discovers that she does, because as it turns out, she actually works with she because of her Model UN thing, she actually knows a lot about social cues and all the other social drama and a bunch of other things. So they decide. So at which point Yumyulack realizes he can hang out with her and effectively learn some of the information that she knows, so that he can make better bets. And of course, he does start hanging out, and what we quickly find out is that he actually does start making pretty decent bets. He actually does start learning how to actually make decent bets. Case in point, and sure enough, as he's hanging out with Jessie, and actually does tag along with her, which she does point out, he feels like he's hanging out with her with ulterior motives, and since Yumyulack doesn't know what ulterior means, he's very happy to just hang out with her. But of course, Yumyulack does wind up using the information she gathers for him to start making smarter and smarter bets, and eventually he does wind up accruing quite a lot of cash. And he winds up buying a really rare, really expensive Beyblade, which conveniently is the name of the episode. And I'm already not entirely sure if I'm going to be able to include that in the title of the episode, because obviously if you've seen the title, if you have a Hulu subscription and you've seen the title, you know that the title is in fact very long and most likely will not fit inside of the character limits for a YouTube title. So yeah, I'm already on the fence about how I'm actually going to name this episode, because it's very long. But in case Yumyulack does brag about his Beyblade to Jessie, and does point out that it is in fact one of the best Beyblades on the market, and that it will not stop spinning for anything. And he does start demonstrating to Jessie, and to a lesser extent the pupa, who comes in and immediately becomes interested in it and decides that he wants it. But Yumyulack just swats the pupa's hands away and tells him to keep his hands off. At which point at a talent show, Yumyulack does decide to actually demonstrate his Beyblade in front of everybody, and of course, while it's supposed to be a talent show, and obviously Yumyulack is very out of place and demonstrating something that cool. What we find out is that Principal Cook apparently does not care. He just walks in, and apparently a combination of him respecting Yumyulack a little bit more, and recognizing that Yumyulack's Beyblade does in fact have game. He walks in and immediately awards Yumyulack first prize, pointing out that is the coolest Beyblade he's ever seen. And of course, Yumyulack is very happy about that, and he winds up going backstage, and two of the people who are running the talent show do decide to ask him how he actually managed to save up enough money for that Beyblade, pointing out that it's very expensive. At which point, Yumyulack decides to do something a little bit dumb, because throughout this episode he kind of develops a little bit of an ego, but he points out that he kind of used Jessie to learn the information that he needed to actually make the bet, and what we find, and of course, this eventually causes Yumyulack to realize, when he sees the reactions, he eventually realizes that Jessie is hiding somewhere, but and it's just a running gag where he can't figure out where, and eventually it's revealed that she's just hiding in her Lakitu cloud, and she heard the whole thing and overheard the fact that she ragged on him, so that he ragged on her. So for that reason, she's very upset with him and points out that he, of course, isn't in fact the best, well, quote unquote, brother. They're technically not related, but also they kind of are related. But she's very upset about the fact that her quote unquote brother betrayed her. So she immediately goes home to start crying, and immediately goes to the ship and Aisha consoles her and tells her that obviously he's worried that she's worried about she points out that Yumyulack just kind of used her, and points out that she's very upset about the fact that Yumyulack used her. So Aisha decides to reassure her, pointing out that she's got a couple but when Jessie points out that she's actually right about the fact that she apparently is obsessive with business about other teenagers' business, because she doesn't have any business of her own. Aisha decides to reassure her by basically bringing in a South Korean boy band called BTK, which is a parody of the boy band BTS, but since Aisha can't afford BTS, BTK is the best thing she can do, and then Aisha makes Jessie feel better by giving her a 7 minutes in heaven experience with a popular South Korean boy band, and meanwhile Yumyulack is actually picked up by Scholastic, who immediately grabs it, who immediately sends 2 Waldos to grab him, and he's pulled in the back of the van and brought to what is left of Scholastic headquarters, and the person in charge of it, who is kind of dressed like Miss Frizzle a little bit, but she then proceeds to tell him that because of all of the bets he's made, nobody has been buying Scholastic books, which of course she points out is bad for her business, and she points out that it's all Yumyulack's fault. But Yumyulack, of course, doesn't understand what she's talking about, pointing out that obviously people are allowed to make their own business decisions. They're allowed to spend what they want to spend their money on. It's not his fault. But of course, the Miss Frizzle stand and then proceeds to bring in a kid that they also abducted, and tells him that he actually started a charity which cost him a lot of book sales, and case in point, they then drop an entire pile of books that proceeds to kill the kid. And they tell him that he has to owe them their money, that the money that they owe him, or he's screwed. And of course Yumyulack immediately runs home to go find Jessie, realizing that he's screwed up and that he needs her help. But by this point, Jessie now has her own teen drama thing, so she is no longer interested in the other people that she usually spies on to learn teen drama about. And of course, when Yumyulack finds out that obviously she has the whole teen drama thing about how she did 7 minutes in heaven with a South Korean boy band, Yumyulack realizes he's screwed, because he explains that now he's in big for Scholastic, and that he needs to hold the biggest bet of all time, and now he realizes now that Jessie isn't going to be able to help him. And at which point she kind of treats him a little bit coldly, because obviously he kind of bragged on her when he thought she wasn't looking. So he proceeds to go on to explain how he realizes now that was actually a very bad move on his part, and explains how he shouldn't have said something like that, and does explain that for what it's worth, he would have liked to have right around in that Lakitu cloud with her, which of course she accepts as an apology, and she points out that while she doesn't know anything about teen drama anymore, she does know where the best place to look is, which is all of the teen drama movies that everybody ever has watched. And of course, you got Breakfast Club, Teen Wolf, a couple of other movie references, and Yumyulack then proceeds to take notes of all the different things that are going on in the movie, and then proceeds to to collect an entire thing that he bets all 4 of will actually. He then proceeds to collect 4 very specific things that will happen during the big game, which is first and foremost them winning the big game, but also a Teen Wolf just appearing out of nowhere. And Teen Wolf just appearing out of nowhere, an undercover person, an undercover offer, and 2 cheerleader groups starring genre, and then finally the big game, which and of course the Hamburger Brothers deny that anything that's going to happen, so they happily take the bet. And also the pupa as well, which of course Yumyulack tells him not to take the bet on because it's obviously a scam, but the pupa insists anyway. At which point Yumyulack then proceeds to go on to use their Teen Wolf ray to actually create a Teen Wolf, which first and foremost starts off the entire thing where that starts filling out the checklist for what they need to do as Scholastic shows up to try and collect their money. And And of course, when Scholastic shows up, Yumyulack tells Jessie that that he has a secret family in New Mexico and that she needs to find them, tell them they love them, and also that he's an alien because apparently they don't know that. But in any case, he does start checking off the things where one by one all the things that just described to you do in fact happen, which with the only thing left being that they have to win the big game. But then, as they're about to win the big game, a second Team Wolf comes out of nowhere and wins the game for the visiting team, which of course winds up becoming a problem with Yumyulack because now Scholastic is going to try and kneecap him, and he and Jessie immediately flee the gym. While it's revealed that the pupa is actually the one who created the second Team Wolf, and he actually hustled the Hamburger Brothers out of their money. So yeah, for that reason, we find out that the Hamburger Brothers start trying to hamburger each other, which of course winds up becoming a problem, and the pupa just kind of leaves with his money. And meanwhile, Yumyulack winds up being cornered with being cornered by Scholastic, and the Miss Frizzle stand in. She grabs him, and they then proceed to claims that she's going to use Mr. Knife Bust to actually stab him unless he can provide all the money he has. And of course he even remarks that he doesn't have any of the money, but he does have an idea for a movie that they can pitch that they can use to make royalties on. But she doesn't listen to that and just proceeds to stab him. At which point the pupa shows up with the money, and Yumyulack pleads with the pupa to give him the money. But as it turns out, the reason the pupa scammed Yumyulack out of the money is because he wanted the Beyblade. And Yumyulack, since he really has no choice, is forced to give the pupa the Beyblade, and then Yumyulack gives the money that pupa collected. At which point they go home and they try to discuss what exactly it is that was going on with the Beyblade system. But and of course Jessie and Yumyulack point out that it was a little bit lucky that he had that pupa cleaned up with the second Team Wolf. And does explain that, and do wonder where the second Team Wolf actually came from. But at which point the pupa just hides the Team Wolf gun under one of the chairs, and that's where just pretends the whole thing doesn't happen. And of course they do remark that that's actually a very, that they're just happy that everything worked out in the end. But Jessie and Yumyulack do wonder what's going to happen to all the people they forced into teen drama stuff. And then proceeds to be a parody of a thing where at the end of every movie they didn't explain what all of the different people at the end of the teen drama stuff actually went on to go do. And it winds up becoming a really funny gag where first and foremost the guy who writes the subtitles goes, "Fuck Annie," but then also the guy just starts talking about his personal feelings about how he realizes now that some of these jokes are actually very lazily written, and he realizes now that it's actually a problem. So, and they realize no, they may actually have a problem, and that's how the episode ends. So yeah, overall this episode is just a really fun thing, and that's Yumyulack learns to start betting on people, but and of course, the episode itself is just a really funny episode. And we do finally find out what's going on the wall. It turns out it's a giant cricket. It's a giant centipede. So, yeah, I'm assuming the people of the wall are going to have to deal with that at some point. But for the time being, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. If it's only a couple bucks a month, it does help support me, so go check those out. Go check out my Twitch. I stream every Sunday at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. Go check those out. Be sure to go check out my Discord. I would like to do more movie watch-alongs with you guys, so just go check that out. Go interact with me over there as well. I would be happy to have you. And what else? Also check out my Twitter because I post updates over there. Just go check that out. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bomb video is the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!